How are you doing today? So in this video, we'll talk about how to create a table and how to drop it, how to record a table, and how to check its properties, right? So here are a list of questions probably we can try to answer from a DDL point of view when we create the table. Yeah, let's get our hands dirty. So first let me check which user I have logged in with. Select user from Dual. Dual is a dummy table in the Oracle database that is provided by database itself. And if you check it, so I have logged in with system user. Probably what I'll try to do is I'll change it to the sales user just for convenience. And now if you check it, I have the sales user over here, right? So what is the first question we are trying to solve over here? Create an empty table. So if you remember, the syntax to create a table was create table and then table name and then open the bracket, then followed by column name, column name, data type, data size, which is optional and is dependent on the type of data type what you're using, etc. The number of columns that we want to add, right? So this is how we create. And the reason why I mentioned column name is like, at least one column should be there in any table, right? Even if you are creating an empty table. So first thing, let's try to create an employees table just for an example. Create table. And right now I'm sales user. However, I would like to specify sales user dot employees. And then what I want is employee ID. And I would like to have the employee ID as number data type. And then we have first name. I would like to store it as a variable character, and the first name can go up to maximum of 100 characters. And then I have last name. Again, I would like to store it with a varchar to data type going up to 100 characters. And then I have date of birth DOB. I can just say that. And it's a date field is what I want to know. And then gender. And I would like to use here char of one char, right? So, and here I'm going to have it whether it is male or female, right? So these are some columns I just wanted to quickly add, right? And if I execute now, invalid SQL statement, it says probably because of the above create statement. Let's see. And in fact, I have spelling mistake here. And if you see it, now the table has been created. So let's try to query it. Select star from. We'll talk more about the select statements later point of time. For now, just know if we do select star, star means retrieve all the columns that are created in this table along with the data. Now, if I just select that and execute, you can see that there is nothing that is returned apart from the column names, which means that there is no data, but the empty table has been created in this case. So this is called as row here, and these are called as columns. So we have 5 columns and there are no rows. There is no data in this table, right? So that's how we create it. However, let's try to understand constraints while creating a table. If you remember part of our session, we understood that, like, a table name cannot be a numeric or special character. They should always be starting with a character. And similar way, even the employee names cannot be started with numerics. Instead, they should always be starting characters. And in case, sorry, let's say that we have created a column and we're keeping the column in double quotes, then we can actually give the spaces as well in the column name, but that is something not recommended. So what I mean by that, let's say that if we have first name, if I just put it like this, first name and then varchar of 100, if you see that there is a syntax issue, that's because it is treating first as a keyword and the name as a string, and then it has where data type, but it could not figure it out because it would assume that first is the column name and then name is the data type, and this data type doesn't exist in this database, right? That is the reason we cannot give a space in a column name or so in that case what we can do is we can actually wrap it in double quotes. The moment you keep it in double quotes, it's going to be stored in the same way. However, this is not recommended, and that is the reason any database developers, if you look at, they always have an underscore instead of a space in any name. And next thing, If we give a name in double quotes, that means you are suggesting the database to take it as it is and do not convert the case with, I mean, like, from lower to uppercase or uppercase to lowercase, you are saying that do not convert it. The reason for this is Oracle database is case sensitive with respect to the metadata, but case sensitive with respect to the data. What do you mean by that, right? So the same table, I'll try to create it once again. And if you see now, it's throwing an error that name is existing, used by an existing object. That means this table already exists. However, what I'm going to do here is I'll just keep it like this, and I just put it like this, and then I'll try to create now. And if you see now, it has been created. So now we have two different tables. How do I check it? Right? Select star from, I can just actually query user underscore tables. And if you see here, we have two different tables, employees and employees, right? So if I run this like this, employees, what it does is still it returns the data from the first table but not from the second table, because the metadata always gets stored in uppercase even if you give it in lowercase. However, if you give it in lowercase and if it is wrapped in double quotes, then it is going to store the case as it is. If it is lowercase or title cap, whatever it is going to take the same case as it is. And that's what you can see. And when I query like this, select star from sales user dot employees, what happens is this name will be converted into the uppercase and then will be checked in the metadata and the data will be retrieved. That means I will end up getting the data from employees. So let's quickly check this. I'll just insert the data. We'll talk DML operations later on, how to insert, how to update, how to delete and all. But this is just for testing purpose. I'm going to make this change now. So what I'll do, sales underscore user dot employee of, I would like to give only one column value for now. Values ABC. So I'll talk about this. Insert into his oh, crap. All right, one row has been inserted. Now I have inserted the data into the table which is in lowercase, and I'm querying the same lowercase table. Let's see. We don't see any data. That's because, as I mentioned, this gets converted into the uppercase when it comes to the metadata, and it will look up for the same metadata. And with the same name, we already have another table. So it is trying to get the data from this table instead of getting the data from this table, right? So how do we query it then? So what we can do is we can just wrap it in double quotes again and then query it. Now you can see there is one row and the employee ID is one, right? So it is always advised not to use any double quotes while creating any table. By giving double quotes, in fact, we can start a column name with a number, or we can have some gaps in the column names and whatnot, but it is not at all recommended, right? That's one thing we have to, right? So that's about like creating an empty table. Now, as we know, we have a table, and let me actually, so this is how we drop the table, drop table and then table name. And if I just execute it, so I mean, this feature is provided by dbeaver, where it is asking, are you sure that you want to run a drop statement which is going to drop a table? Because this is just to prevent that people will not accidentally drop any table from the database in case if they have the permissions. Ideally in production, the regular developers may not have it, but dbs may have it, and just a precaution, it's trying to prevent us from dropping accidentally any table. And in my case, I know that I need to drop it, so I'll just click on OK, and we can see that it is succeeded. Now if I try to query the same table, you can see that it is throwing an error because I'm trying to query it with double quotes. So let me, and if you see now it is working fine because this is trying to query this table, right? How? All right. So what I'll just remove these double quotes and then I'll run the insert statement once again, and we can see that now the data has been inserted into the actual table. And if I query it, in fact, I can see it. So this means that this insert statement has inserted the data into this particular table, and this doesn't exist any longer, right? Now I would like to create an empty table with this name from the existing table. How do I do it? So create table, table name as I'll just remove this. So as I mentioned, like Oracle SQL is case insensitive when it comes to the metadata, but case sensitive when it comes to the data, which means that this as keyword, whether I give it in lowercase or uppercase, it doesn't matter. And what we are trying to do is create a table here, create table name, and then I'm saying as similar to select star from sales user data employees. Whatever the structure we get as output from this table, sales user data employees, the same structure, use it and create the table is what we are trying to say. In this case, it is going to copy entire metadata, not the constraints. We'll talk about it later on when we talk about constraints. But for now, remember that like it's not going to copy any constraints except the not null constraint. Now, however, one more thing is that our requirement is to create an empty table from an existing table. But then in this case, it is going to copy this. I'll just put in double quote so that we query the new table. And if you see, it has got the data as well. However, our requirement was not to have the data when I create a copy of the existing table. That's because if we don't specify any condition, that means it will assume that you have to create a table from an existing table with the entire data as well, not just the structure. And in case if we don't want to pull the data as well into the new table, we can just specify that where 1 equal to 2 or x equal to y or something, a condition which doesn't satisfy. As long as the condition doesn't satisfy, it will not fetch any data. If I just put it 1 equal to 1, it is nothing but like without having where condition, if we run the create statement, how does it execute and copies the data the same way it will execute. If I put 1 equal to 1 or if I put equal to 1 equal to 2, that means that it will never be satisfied, which means that it is only going to create the table with the metadata alone. So let's do that once again, right? So I'm just dropping this table once again, and then now I'll create it. As you can see, it has been created, and then I'll try to query the select statement. And if you see, I'm not getting the data. So my actual table has the data, right? So if you see here, without double quotes, when I query it, it is copying the live table inside which like I have inserted the data earlier, and I have the data there. But the new table with double quotes, when I query it, I don't see the data. That's because I have used where 1 equal to 2, which is a false condition. The moment you give the false condition, it doesn't copy the data, it just copies the structure. All right. Now you might have a question. What if I go back and modify the data in the original table? Will it reflect the same changes in the new table that has been copied? No. In Oracle, it doesn't work like that. So the moment you create a table, it's a separate object that has been created altogether. It doesn't, synonym basically to reflect the changes in the underlying table, in the reference table, but it's a standalone object independent of any other car integrity rules that are applied to the parent table. All those are not applied to the new table when we do like this, right? Now, so now we have seen that how to create a table, and then how to create an empty table, and then how to create an empty table from an existing table. And then we have also seen how to create a table along with the data, which is nothing but like without specifying where 1 equal to 2, copy the data, or if you specify where 1 equal to 1, that will satisfy always, and it is going to copy entire data as well. And this concept is also called as CTAS, which stands for create table as, right? C stands for create table as, right? This is what known as CTOS. So people often, while talking, they'll say that how are you going to create it? That means like they'll say that we are going to create the table using CTOS, which means that we are going to create the table using create table name as select star from existing table. So it is not that like we have to always create the new table with all the columns. We can actually specify what columns we want. Only for those columns we can create the new table. So let me just copy this and then paste it over here, and this time I'll just remove these double quotes, and what I'll do is want uh, employee ID, first name, last name, right? And I just want to create the table only for these columns. Now if the table will be created, sorry, here I did not change this, yeah. And now we can see that the new table has been created, and if I do select star from new table, select star from sales user dot employees one, and now we can see that the new table exists with only three columns, not all the columns, right? All right. Now, what if I have a requirement that I don't want to use the original column names, but I want to have my own column names, right? In that case, what we can do is for create table statement I'll be taking, and this time employee ID as the first name as, oh sorry, as last name. And if I run this statement now, I'll make it as 2, run this, and now you see here it is created with EMP ID, first name and last name instead of the original name. Uh, what if I want to have different data types? So what do we mean by that? Right. So let's see what are the data types we have from user underscore tab underscore calls. I think it should be existing. Yeah. Right. Where table underscore name equal to, and I would like to give it as employees, and owner equal to, you know what, actually owner is not applicable because we have used user underscore tables. That means that it is only going to give us the table that are owned by sales user, and that's the user I have logged in with, right? And if you see here, these are different columns that we have in the original table employees that we have created, and these are the data types, right? So what if I want to have employee ID character instead of number, right? That's because, when I created the new table here, employees one or employees two, which is a copy, if you see, it is carrying the same data type. The data type doesn't change. So my requirement, the table has uh, data as a number data types. Still, I want to change it and I want to store it as variable character. Then how do I do it? So for that, there is a function called as cast. So what we can do is cast of employee ID as value of, let's say that, maybe 10 characters, right? And I'll just close this. Now I'll create it as 3 and I'll run it. And now I'll check employees table 3. And if you see now employee ID, it has been created as variable character 2, and it has data length of 40. Why this? Data type and then data length 40. This is not sounding good. That's because I have given 10, but let's check this. I'll quickly drop this table and it is, um, just a minute. Yes, now we can see the data length is 10. So why was it like earlier 40, but now it is only 10? No, it is taking each character as 4 bytes, and that's why it is taking like total 40 byte and characters of you know length, right? That was the reason. And this is something I have explained when I was talking about the data types, right, in the previous video. So now we know how to create a table from an existing table, how to create the table with different names, and how to create the table by changing the data type while creating the table from an existing one. And then we have seen how to table. Now let's try to create, let's try to add a new column. Before we try to add a new column, right? So if you check how to check column names and their data types is something we have already seen, and then how to check what is the size of, this is something we are to discuss. Let's go to this, right? All right. Now the next thing is, if a table is dropped, how do I recover this, right? So for example, now I'm going to drop table 3. Drop table employees 3 and just hit OK. Now it has been dropped, and if we try to query it, we'll get an error that table RV does not exist, right? How do we get it? So what we can do is, so it's called as select star from recycle bin, if I'm not wrong. Yes, and if you see here, we have two times we have dropped this table, and both the times it has been stored into the recycle bin. Recycle bin is a table, and any object that has been dropped from the database, by default it goes to the recycle bin. However, there is an option. If we drop it with uh, s- send the table even to the recycle bin, drop it permanently from the database, right? So how do I restore this table, right? Restore table employees 3 flashback to before drop, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So flashback the table name to before drop. Yes. Now we can see that to query it now. Here we see that the table is back, right? So this is how we can always get the table dropped. But now let's drop the table using purge operation, and then we'll try to check the recycle bin one. And now you can't see the other employees 3, which was dropped because that has been permanently dropped. So purge recycle bin, it has been purged, which means that now there is no object that can be flashbacked again, that can be restored, right? This is how we always restore the table or we flashbacked again, right? um, and then we want to check the size of a table in the database. So let's do this, right? I'll query it right away. Select star from underscore since there's a table. Okay, so hope we have access to this. All right, and from user underscore segments. Yes. So here, I mean, earlier I was querying the dictionary tables called DB underscore and R underscore segments. It's not like by default, the database users will get the access to these dictionary tables. However, user underscore segments is something local to this particular, so I'm able to query it. So remember always, there will be three types of dictionary tables. One is like user underscore, second one is R underscore, and third one is DB underscore, right? If you want to see what tables do you have, what columns do you have, then probably you should now. um, what we want to check is like what is the size of this table, right? And if I scroll it, here you can see that bytes and blocks and extents. So right now we have one extent. Let me do this way. So one extent we have, and 8 blocks case block size, right? So select 8 blocks into 8 KB, and this is multiplied with 1024 from UL, and then if we query 8. So what's the value? Here we're getting 65,536 bytes. This is in bytes, right? Now, if I go back and query user underscore segments, here you can see the bytes is also 65,536 bytes. This means by default, when the table is created, it will be allocated with one extent. One segment can have multiple extents, but initially it is with one extent it gets started, and the extent will contain by default 8 blocks, and each block by default will have 8 KB of block size, and 8 KB of block size depends on the table space and how we are creating the block size at the table space level, right? So in this case, by default I have 8 KB as a block size in my table space. Reason, we have total 65,536 bytes of memory that has been allocated, and as you keep inserting the data, the number of extents will also increase, and then number of blocks that is consumed by this table will also be increased, and subsequently the bytes will also start increasing, right? So that's how we check the size of a table. You can check the same information under all underscore segments and db underscore, you'll get the same response out there as well. And what if I want to check what is my table space name in this case? Right here, you can see that the table space name is users. That means I have a table space name called users, and which is pointing to the users.dbf. Data is getting stored, right? And this is not a part case. If the table is partition, we'll end up seeing the partition name over here. But in this case, the segment type is table. That means that this record stands for a table record, not a partition record. And part time in the next videos. All right. Um, and the next thing, what so we are also saying that how to check in which schema the table has been created, right? How do we check that? So I mean, right now we don't have the access to use the all underscore tables or db underscore tables. I can go to another window, and I'll be changing this to RCL. And if you check, I have logged in with sys user, right? System. So what I'll do is select star from all underscore tables, where table underscore name equal to employees. So what this one does now is it will give me uh, any entry, any table that has been created with name employees across the database irrespective of the schemas, right? If I just query it right now, we can see that in HR schema, there is a table called employees. In school underscore db, there is a table called employees. And then sales underscore user, there is a table called employees. So we have three different tables now, right? I mean, the same employee has been created in three different schemas. So can we create once again the same object in the same schema? No. Oracle will always allow you to create only one object with one name in a given schema, right? And that's why obviously you'll not be able to create it. Now, how to check a column has been removed or not from a table. So this is something we'll check now. So all of these are covered now. Yeah. So how to add a new column to an existing table, right? So this is something very often we'll have to do. What we can do is alter table, and in which table we are trying to add this column. So it is sales underscore users, user dot employees, and what I want to add, and what is the column name I want to add. Let's say that department ID, and I'll say that it is number data type, and just execute this. Right now it has been added. How do I check whether this column has been added or not? One simple way of checking is select star from sales underscore all the columns and their data. So here you can see that we have, and if you see that, like, we already have a row for employee ID 1, and we have inserted the data only for column employee ID, and rest all the columns we left it as null values. And whenever you add a new column, by default it gets populated with the null value, right? So this is how we check it. And the other one, r underscore uh, user underscore calls, where table underscore to employees, and here you can check it once again. The column name is department ID, and it has been added successfully, right? So this is like querying the dictionary table, and this is nothing but like querying the actual table to see what are the columns. Imagine that you have like 300 columns in a table, and you have added a column. Remember, always the column gets added at the end, right? So it doesn't get added in between. Whenever you insert the data, it always gets added at the end. Okay, we cannot add it in between even if we want to add it, until unless we drop the columns and then rearrange the columns and add them back to the table once again. All right, so this is how we add a column. And now what if I want to drop this column that is newly added? Alter table sales underscore user dot employees, drop the dept underscore id, and just run this. um, it is employees, not employed. Yes, now it has been removed. And if we go back and query the employees table once again, now we don't see that over here, right? It has been dropped. And even in fact, we can check it in user tab calls as well. And we don't see here either, right? That means it has been removed. So we create the table, we create an empty table, we uh, copy the table structure to a new table, or we can rename the columns while creating the table, and we can change the data types while creating the new table from an existing table. We can drop the table, we can flashback the table always from the recycle bin in case or it was not dropped using the purge keyword. And then we also now knew, like, how to check the table size. Always remember that the table size may not be accurate whenever you insert the data. There is something called stale statistics, which we'll be talking about later on. So if you have inserted the data but you did not gather the stats, then then the size of the table what you'll be seeing in the dictionary tables may not be accurate. In that case, you have to actually gather. I'll be talking about in a separate video, right? And then we have checked how to flashback, and then now we have discussed how to add a new column to the existing table, how to drop a column from an existing table, and how to check whether the table whether the or not, or the table column has been dropped or not. And in fact, we also have looked at how to in which schemas the table exists, right? Now let's look at another example, probably like, this is the last one. So what if I want to rename existing table, right? So let's say underscore new. So rename employees underscore, right? And object employees, there is a spelling mistake, right? And we can see that now it has been removed. So let's try to query this employees table, and obviously it will throw an error, right? Table RV does not exist. But if we try to query the new table, new, it does exist. That way, we can also rename existing columns. So alter table, sales underscore user dot employees underscore new, rename column. Let's say that employee ID, I want to change it to EMP underscore ID. Sorry about the typos. Now it has been renamed. And if we just go ahead and query the new table, it has been GID, right? So this is how we can rename we can rename an existing column as well. And yeah, we'll talk about truncate, but I would like to discuss it part of the DML operation so that I can exactly distinguish why truncate is part of DML, right? So similar way, we can change the data size, we can modify the data type as well, which I'll be talking about it part of the next video. Until then, take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.